Last February, the Minister for Broadcasting and Media, Chris Farfoy, chose the premises of one of the country's very oldest newspapers, the Otago Daily Times, to announce that $55 million would be spent over the next 3 years to sustain local news and journalism. During the uncertainty of the COVID lockdown the previous year, he pledged to support at-risk journalism in the interests of democracy, and the Minister actually has another $20 million up his sleeve if Cabinet thinks the media need that too. And this makes the Public Interest Journalism Fund the biggest single public investment in journalism for decades. Media companies big and small, local and national, public and private alike, can all apply to it, even those who've never had public money before. Now, the government insisted that this fund would be dispensed at arm's length from it by the government's broadcasting funding agency, New Zealand On Air, though its board members are of course appointed by the Minister of Broadcasting. And opposition politicians have complained long and loud that the media will be reluctant to bite the government hand feeding them. Just last Thursday, National Party leader Judith Collins said this in an interview on Facebook. Raewyn Rash is New Zealand On Air's recently appointed head of journalism. Kia ora, Raewyn, thank you very much for joining us on the program.
Kia ora, nice to be here.
When the fund was launched by the Minister, he specifically referred to things like at-risk public interest journalism and underserved audiences. But I do note from some of the things that have been funded, some of it's not. Well, as you'll be aware, there's been some political criticism of the fund even before it opened, just the idea of it. People concerned, specifically opposition politicians, about the media coming onto the government payroll effectively. Judith Collins just this week was voicing those concerns. For example, Carl Dufresne, a former newspaper editor, wrote to his former paper to say, organisations have to commit to a set of requirements that include, among other things, actively promoting the principles of Te Tiriti o Waitangi. And he says, in other words, a news outlet that seeks money from the fund is signing up to a politicised project whose rules are incompatible with free and independent journalism. I mean, is he actually right about that?
I take offence at some of the criticism that, especially around Te Tiriti, I do not understand how encouraging and incentivising our media to understand our founding document and therefore provide better engagement with all New Zealanders is a bad thing.
Well, and the way that Judith Collins put it, specifically, the principles of the treaty, what's that got to do with the operation of a free and independent media? It should be up to them to decide what they cover, and they shouldn't have to have in the back of their minds whether it's consistent with the treaty or not. I think that was her objection.
They're confusing two things. One is how the media covers things, and the fund does not editorialise how they cover things, or what they cover or what they say in their coverage. It does require that they understand Te Tiriti principles. So if you understand Te Tiriti principles and you want to be critical of those principles, then well and good. But actually many media organisations do not understand Te Tiriti, and therefore the conversations that they are curating run the risk of being biased, racist, and not delivering to the Te Tiriti partner that is Māori or tangata whenua.
Well, one specific objection that was made was to say, look, if the treaty and what it should role it should have in our constitutional political arrangements is actually a bit of a topic at the moment, with, I guess, news around He Puapua and things like that. So if someone actually wanted to apply to the fund to make a program that covered those topics, would that be possible, or would that be something regarded as a bit too contentious because it might be seen as potentially undermining Te Tiriti?
We absolutely want to encourage conversation in this sphere, but we want to ensure that that conversation is fair and that it is actually coming from an understanding of what Te Tiriti is actually about, so that we're not just getting into a polarised debate where we get into a debate where actually both sides of the story can be told. I don't see why that would be a bad thing.
And for some projects, for example, there's one about explaining the possible consequences of the rupture of the Alpine Fault. And in that instance, I mean, the treaty wouldn't really come into that at all?
Yes, it does. I mean, that's the thing. Te Tiriti actually comes into everything. When we first looked at that proposal, we noted that there was no Māori content in that proposal at all. So we went back to the proposers and had a chat, and actually, what they've come back with is fantastic. And they are, the project is stronger because now they have some engagement with Ngāi Tahu. Ngāi Tahu absolutely have lots of experience of the earthquake situation and how it affects their communities. I think we've strengthened that proposal because now it has one element of it that will actually provide to Māori audiences and also provide a viewpoint that other audiences may not have seen before. So I think that strengthens it. I don't think it made them, it wasn't a requirement that was onerous. And in fact, I think they would say themselves that actually it's a good thing.
So people might end up putting proposals forward that might have no identifiable Māori element or consciousness in it. And in that instance, the proposal might be considered, but whoever proposed it might get feedback. Well, look, why don't you amend it in this way to include, here are some perspectives you may not have thought about. Please include these in your final product. And yes, then it can be considered. Is that the way it works?
Yeah, and I think, the whole idea around asking organisations to think, to have a te tiriti lens at the very heart of their organisation means that we wouldn't have to have these conversations. I'm not sure why in 2021 I need to explain to media that actually it's important that Māori voices are seen and heard.
And then at your June summit, there's material on the website showing a proposal from the Aotearoa Media Collective about bringing cultural capacity and even this concept of partnership editors, and that applications could apply to New Zealand On Air for a partnership editor. Does that mean actually you could have an editor attached to you who would have knowledge of tikanga and te ao Māori, and they would be part of the project?
No, it's actually much more fundamental than that. And what it's actually trying to do is to put partnership editors at the senior level of an organisation so that they can provide that guidance and that surety around things at a very senior level, and therefore it would flow down through things so that, hopefully one day you wouldn't need to, have cultural advisors assigned to particular projects, because from an organisational level there is some sort of cultural safety sort of built into it. And so we're not just telling people, to do this. We're actually going to help facilitate that by using the Aotearoa Media Collective to come in and assist companies to look at their strengths and weaknesses and to see how they could create a partnership role. So the partnership editor roles will be run as a pilot. We'll work with the industry each time we come to a round. We reassess. Is this providing the best bang for buck as we go forward, and how can we change those criteria? So we'll continue to be in touch with the sector about how things are working. I'm not concerned that we are holding the media or making them jump through hoops they don't want to jump through. These are hoops that maybe they should have been jumping through a very long time ago.